Well, as people start to continue to come in, I will go ahead and get started so we have lots of time for this conversation. Thank you all so much for being here. We know that you all have many options and choices and places to be. So we're just grateful that you're sharing some of your time with us today. It's always so good to be in community with all of you, whether in person or online. So thanks for being here. My name is Becky Migas, she, her pronouns, and I am the Chief Care Connector and founder of Women in Sustainability. For those who are new, we got lots of members in here today, but for those who are just joining us for the first time, Women in Sustainability is an inclusive social and environmental justice nonprofit that is dedicated to caring for the people who care for the planet through our 4 pillars of community, advocacy, resources, and education to create a sustainable and equitable future through the feminist viewpoint and leadership. Women in Sustainability strives to create a safe space for like-minded and diverse individuals to create purposeful conversations, such as we're having today about conversations. This is a perfect topic for us. So we're so thankful to have Brie here. Well, I'm going to introduce my friend Brie. I'm so excited that she is joining to be a part of this conversation about how do we connect in a more purposeful way. This is so much about what Women in Sustainability is about. So Brie is the COO of Finding Good, supporting people to create and use meaningful connection as a tool for learning, growth, and change. You might also know Brie through Breezy Operations, but she loves to explore the unique and exciting intersections of her passions of human connection, organization, business management, and sustainability. When she's not working, which I know probably a lot, but Brie is also in the mountains skiing with her husband, spending time with her new little one, enjoying trips in their campers or hiking with their dog, Emmy. So please help me give a warm Women in Sustainability welcome to Brie Zoller.
Thanks, Becky. I always love these. I'm excited to be here again. I did chat with you guys doing a webinar last year with structuring your business with sustainability in mind. And now I'm shifting it through my other partner business that I have of connecting conversations. And I will just give you guys a heads up. This is an interactive session. So a couple opportunities to either plug some information into the chat or your responses into the chat. You can also raise your hand and we can take you off of mute so that we can hear your response as well. But I do want to make sure that you are prepared to interact. We are also going to have breakout portion where we're going to be practicing these connecting conversation skills as well. So just a heads up for that. If you do not have the ability to go into a breakout room, perhaps you're in a place where you can't chat, you can't get into that space, what I'm going to ask is if you can click the ... on top of your image or in your name in the participant section. And if you can put an X next to your name, and that way we know not to put you in a breakout room. So with that, we are going to jump into things of connecting conversations in sustainability specifically. Now, first, let's talk about the problem that we might be facing when it comes to connecting or disconnecting conversations. So if you are in the sustainability realm whatsoever, whether it's passion or professional, you probably have experienced several of these common sustainability-based conversations. The first one being lamenting. And this is where we're chatting about, the pains that we're seeing with our other sustainability like-minded folks. And we're just talking about like the doom spiral, if you will. If you know what I'm talking about, where you're just kind of going down and down this circle of just like the woe of the world, climate change. It's really painful to look at the planet right now, some of the policies that are being enacted and affecting us in the work that we're trying to do. So that's one type of conversation that we might have on a regular basis. Another conversation, and this is with people who perhaps they're exploring the sustainability realm and they come to us, and I've got a great example of this for correcting and helping. So there's an example of this where my wonderful mom knows that I'm very passionate about sustainability and I chat with her all the time about it. And she came to me and said, I got my community to move from styrofoam containers to plastic containers. So that way we're not doing, we can recycle the plastic containers. They're not styrofoam anymore. And instead of celebrating the fact that she was making an effort, that she did have sustainability in mind, I instead corrected her and went, actually, those containers aren't recyclable. Now, I'm curious, why do you guys think that conversation might not be connecting? How could that be a disconnecting conversation when I am correcting her and saying, actually, that's not a sustainable thing? Why might that be disconnecting? Any thoughts on that?
Well, you immediately dismissed her efforts towards doing the right thing. So first,
Yep.
It would, I guess, been more constructive to do what you said. First, praise her for her efforts, and then gently begin the second part of that conversation.
Right. Well, and what we're going to be talking about today is not even going down that second part, but first just celebrating the fact that she was thinking about it, that she cared about it, so that she continues to take those same actions again in the future. So that's probably a conversation that many of us have run into. And I want to be clear also, when I'm talking about these conversations, all of it is because we care. It has nothing to do with us being, bad people, annoying people. We genuinely care. I love my mom and I love the environment. This is really, a passion area of mine. It doesn't come from a place of hurt. And then the last one that we have here is, I'm going to call it educating, but this is also unsolicited advice. It's another way of saying that, where folks, we see someone doing something or we notice it and we go out of our way to tell them, hey, this is something that we, maybe you should consider doing this way. Did you know that this is actually harmful? Did you know that's not correct? And I've got another kind of example on this of, I've got a park across the street from my house and I pick up trash there on a daily basis. I go for walks twice a day with my dog. There's usually garbage all over the place and I pick it all up. And I had a moment where there were some kids hanging out at the park and they left a whole bunch of they were walking away from where they were sitting and there was a whole bunch of garbage there. And I walked up to them and I started talking about like, hey, you guys, did you know that nobody picks up the garbage after you? Like there's no magic fairy that makes it go away. I actually pick up all of your garbage after you leave. And they started speaking very rudely to me afterwards. So I'm curious, and just understanding the human condition, that's actually a very understandable response. What do you think they were experiencing when I, out of nowhere, just came up to them and started telling them to do something different? What do you think was going through their heads? Yeah, Christine, they were defensive. Absolutely. They probably were thinking like, and not only that, there could have also potentially been shame involved. Just another adult telling them what to do. They could be embarrassed, but not wanting to act like it in front of their friends, annoyed. Absolutely. So even though, I'm going to not answer that question, Bernice, but I appreciate it. So there were a number of things that could have been done differently in all of these conversation examples that I'm offering here of I cared in all of these situations, but my behavior didn't show that I cared. The way that I engaged with these people didn't show that I cared. And what happens, and we talked about this already in some of the responses that you give, is that our brain actually perceives social distress the same way we experience physical pain. So what that means is when I point out people doing things wrong, when I course correct them, I give them unsolicited advice or I educate them, what happens in their brain, if they are made to feel other, that's the same thing as physical pain. It activates the same part of our brain. So when we want to impact other people, we actually need to keep this in mind of trying to make them not feel other, trying to not shame them, making a best effort to actually celebrate them in any way possible. So what I'm going to do is share our methodology that we created around finding good story exchange conversations. We've got this concept here. We've got this, my company is called Finding Good. We've got these connecting conversation frameworks that we created. And in order for us to develop these connecting conversations, there's a few things that need to happen. First, we need to get into the Finding Good mindset. And I'll explain all of these in the next few slides. Getting into the Finding Good mindset. Second part is asking for their story and showing that you care. And when we go through this listening-based activity, and this is, I'm going to be very clear, this is us putting ourselves in the position where we are discovering about the other person, then we are able to actually influence them better. When listening leads to connection, what ends up happening is we get better teamwork, better collaboration, learning, and change through this process. So with that, this finding good mindset. So what we need when we go into these conversations, and what I'm going to encourage you guys to do today when we go into our breakout sessions, is to have this mindset of, I have something to learn from this person. No matter where they're coming from, what background they have, where they grew up, what their beliefs or values are, I have something to learn from them. I'm genuinely curious about them. I am not here to do anything but learn about them. And that's what I truly want to do in these few minutes that we're having this conversation. And the belief that I bet they have a great story. I believe that there's something about them that I am not aware of that is absolutely brilliant, that we can, I'm going to say unite behind, but basically finding the common good between the two of us. No matter what our backgrounds are, we have a common good between the two of us, and I'm going to find that story with that person. So that's what we need to believe before we go into a finding good conversation, is I've got something to learn from this person. I'm genuinely curious, and I bet they have a great story. And then we have this concept of asking for their story, and we do this with a starter question. So today, you guys are getting this education of like, this is how we have the conversation. So when you jump into your conversations, you're going to know the process, and everyone has a mutual understanding. When you're doing this with other folks, all you have to do is say, hey, I learned this crazy conversation technique. Can I try this out with you? This is the process. This is what I'm going to be going through. So we have our starter questions, and these are some example questions of what was a good part about your week? What was the best part of your day? Or how did you make the world a better place? And each of these kind of escalate in, how do I describe it? Intensity, if you will. So when we start off with the what was good about your week, that actually doesn't require any responsibility on their part. That means this is someone who, they might not be able to necessarily see the good that easily. So when we ask this question, we're not asking them to take responsibility, just to notice what the good is. Whereas if we look at that last question there, how did you make the world a better place this week? They have to have a lot of, self-awareness and confidence and belief in themselves to be able to respond to that question. So what you might notice in all of these questions are 3 features that we always have in our Finding Good questions. So the first one is that it is positively focused. We are focusing on the added value, on the positive value of their story. The second question is that it's past oriented. This means that we are assuming this already happened and that it did happen in their lives. So we want to make sure we're not talking about a future thing. We are talking about something that already exists in their life. And then the third feature of these questions is that it's a specific time that we are interested in. We are looking for the story, the actual event. So that way we can dig in a little deeper. And when I say that, almost picture it like you're watching Netflix or you're reading a story and you want to get all of the details about that specific event, trying to put yourself in their shoes, questioning your assumptions, getting more details about what they actually experienced. And then we've got this, women in sustainability. We've got our we care thing. So I definitely want to make sure that I include that in here of showing that we care. So the ways that we go about showing that we care in these conversations, first off, is making it easy for them. We're asking positive experience questions. It's really easy for us to move into the negative, say, well, I didn't do this, I could have done that. We're only asking the positive experience questions, making it valuable to you as the question asker. So what that means is asking for more details, asking for clarity, saying, I want to put myself in your shoes. Like, let me get some more details in here. And then the third one is making it worth it to them to have this conversation. By making it worth it to them, first off, there's many different aspects of this. Part of it is just validation in general, validating their experience, validating that, they did make a difference, or that they did do a good thing, or that good thing was real. And also, when you show genuine curiosity in someone, it makes them feel like they are worth something. When I am digging into a conversation and I'm going, hold on, this thing happened to you. How did you even do that? What did it feel like? When I'm jumping in with those questions, they feel like they're providing me with added benefit, not necessarily the other way around. And that feels great for them. And then the last key part of showing that we care is no sofa. So we don't want to be a sofa potato. And SOFA stands for suggestions, opinions, feedback, and advice. When we're having these finding good conversations, it is so easy for us to say, oh, did you consider doing this? Why don't you do this next time? Things along, or I would have done this. Whenever someone's sharing their story with us, it is so natural for us to want to jump in with our own story or our own perspective. But in order to show that we truly care, we actually need to pull back on that a little bit and allow them to continue sharing their story and validating their experience. And that is how we show that we truly care, is no sofa, suggestions, opinions, feedback, or advice, which is really hard in the sustainability world. But that being said, going back to that conversation with my mom, what if instead I asked her, like, oh, what was your inspiration for wanting to make this change in your community? How'd you come up with the idea? What kind of research did you do? If I ask questions that reinforce her desire and the feeling to make a difference, even if necessarily it wasn't the right difference, in order to re-encourage the same behavior in the future, having her relive that with me is so impactful. And then when we're done with these story exchange conversations, when we go through that process, having a focused reflection where we tell them, this is the value that I got out of this conversation. I learned this about you. I saw myself in your shoes and it inspired me. It motivated me. It made me feel more connected to you. Identifying what felt important to them. So we often make assumptions of what's important to the other person. We should question that more. We should really dig in and say, I really want to actually understand where you're coming from with this. What was your motivation? What was your inspiration? Why was it important to you? So reflecting that back to them. And our reflections are short, sweet, and non-repetitive. So when we do a reflection, generally when I'm facilitating this with my groups at work, it's 1 minute at most of, this is what I learned about you. This is what sounds important to you. And this is the difference that you just made in my life. So with that, we're going to now demonstrate. I'm going to demonstrate what this process looks like, and hopefully with a brave volunteer for going through this conversation. And then afterwards, we're going to go into breakout rooms and practice having these conversations with a partner. So, and it's going to be a 5-minute demonstration. I am going to ask the starter question of what went well in the last week because of you. And then after that, I'm only going to ask questions for 5 minutes. That's the key here, is only asking questions. A very difficult thing to do, but it's incredibly effective. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are any brave volunteers who are willing to have a finding good conversation with me to demonstrate to the group before we go into our breakout rooms. Oh boy.
I can try.
Brandy, are you volunteering?
Yeah.
I appreciate it. All right. So with that, I will also put a couple rules in place for both of us. So one of them being, if there are any questions that I ask that you are not comfortable with, you can say, can I get a different question, please? That is perfectly okay. And I appreciate that boundary. And I also will ask that you keep your responses somewhat brief. And by somewhat brief, 1 minute at most. So that way we can show the whole back and forth process of me asking you questions. How's that sound?
Great.
All right, awesome. So let me get my timer going, and that way I don't have to watch the clock. All right, Brandy, thank you for doing this with me. If I may ask, what went well in the last week because of you?
I helped to put together a litter cleanup in my neighborhood this past weekend, and it's your story, of course, is making me reflect back on that. It was a little disappointing that even though we did all of the best that we could to get folks to show up, it ended up just being sort of the people that planned it and then a small smattering of some other people. So it felt kind of disappointing in the beginning, but within 2 hours, we cleaned up so much stuff that it was just absolutely undeniable that it didn't matter that much how many people really showed up. We had a really huge success. So I'm still sort of riding on that high and hoping that we can continue stuff like this in the future.
That is awesome. Can you clarify for me what was the part that felt really good about it? Like you said you're still riding that high. What was it about it that got you there?
Yeah, I am feeling pretty connected to some of the things that have been said during this call already, because I do a lot of stuff in my neighborhood and have been kind of a part of leadership for many, many, many years. And I feel that sometimes I don't do a good job of speaking positively. And it's kind of like a slippery slope, when one thing is kind of disappointing, then the next thing can, it's easy to sort of speak about the things that aren't going well. But I think that having a successful event this past weekend and seeing some like actual tangible results of that just makes me feel more connected with the fact that it doesn't have to be the entire neighborhood that shows up to get something done. It really can be a small group. So try to stay positive even when it doesn't go exactly as planned.
I'm curious about, you mentioned, the kind of initial disappointment. How did you go from that kind of initial disappointment to actually feeling really good about it?
It happened in a very short amount of time because we only had about a 2-hour window to do the cleanup. But I have to say, the folks that were there just kicked butt, and it was hot, and but we were all just really motivated, and we ended up utilizing a Denver Parks and Rec kind of area to collect the trash. And this made it a little more difficult, but instead of putting the stuff directly in the dumpster, this like big old dumpster that was there, we made sure that we put a pile together so that we could see ourselves what we had done in that 2-hour period, but also then had like a picture to share with the rest of the neighborhood so they could also feel encouraged. And just before I hopped on this call, I actually popped on Facebook, and yeah, there's all kinds of people super happy that happened. And so I just am hoping then to sort of ride that wave a little bit when we plan our next litter cleanup next month.
So I'm curious, you mentioned like tangible results and then seeing the pile of garbage that you collected. And I want to know like why that was important to you to see it.
I think it was especially, gosh, this isn't just with litter, right? But I know for myself, sometimes if I go for a walk, if I pick up that first piece of litter, then that's sort of my destiny for that walk. It's just kind of tough to not continue. And so there's lots of times when I go for walks where I'm like, no, I will not pick up one single thing, because like I want to actually like, you know, stay out of my head and things like that. So I think seeing the tangible, the pile together, I don't know, I feel like it just speaks the story of, and that is the way we did share it on our neighborhood social media, is in less than 2 hours, this is what was collected. Because I understand completely, because I feel it this way all the time myself, is just sort of desperation. Like there's too much to do. How can we really, what's one thing going to even do to help? But like having a tangible, I mean, obviously we could touch it too, but actual photo of like what can be accomplished in a very small amount of time, that carries a lot of weight, I think.
And we're at 5 minutes. Thank you for trying that out with me, Brandy. So something that I learned about you is it appears that you both have a care for the environment, but also for your community that you're in. And trying to bring those two together is a challenge that you have taken on that's had varying results. But what was awesome about this is that you were able to make such a big impact in a short amount of time with just a few people. And you were able to not only experience that yourself, but then you were able to share that with your entire community. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome. I'm lucky it just happened last weekend.
Awesome. So I'm curious, for everyone who got to observe that, what did you notice about the conversation that we had? And feel free, you can raise your hand, take yourself off mute, or throw it into the chat. What did you notice about that conversation?
Oh, hi, this is Ellen. I noticed that in the beginning, it felt like Brandy was more negative about her experience. And then the more positive questions you asked, the more she was willing to acknowledge the positive experience.
Yep, totally. And that is just what we do as humans. We have so many opportunities to improve. And it takes so much work for us to just focus on the actual good that we're doing. And let's celebrate ourselves. That is a very intentional part of this. So I'm glad that you pointed that one out, Ellen. Christine, what did you notice about the conversation?
Yeah, I think similarly, but on your side, it's easy to fall into the lamenting with someone to sort of connect. But you were intentionally sort of listening and then redirecting towards the action. So it was great to see that, and how she said, whoever just spoke, like it seemed to shift the mindset of the conversation, or the content of the conversation, but it was just really about like redirecting the focus.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for noticing that, Christine. What else did you guys notice? Anyone, anything else before we jump in? Any questions on the process before we jump into our breakout rooms and have these connecting conversations?
I have a selfish question.
Yes.
Brie, what do you think that you could have said to those young kids in the park asking for a friend?
Right. That's a really good question that I have not given any consideration to. I probably would have talked about how they were enjoying the park and why they were coming to the park, and noticing that I did notice they were there on like a daily basis that week, and probably could have had more of a conversation around why they enjoy the park, what about the park they enjoy, what they're getting out of it being there together. And maybe that would give them an opportunity to take a step back and think about the park as more of a home and a shared space instead of just a place that they're sitting. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's a really hard thing to put into practice, even as someone who's been doing this 3 years. But that's probably, if I was very intentional about it and I wasn't lit up in the moment, I would have probably paused to have that conversation with them. Yeah.
Thank you for
Do
sharing.
you
We're
think
all
you-
works in progress, right? Like
Right? Yeah.
till the end. Yeah.
Do you think you would have gone so far as to do what might be like a passive aggressive, make sure they see you cleaning up after the conversation is over?
Perhaps. I mean, there's no right way to deal with any of these, but that probably would have been a conversation where, honestly, probably what I would have done is, while having the conversation with them, just like picking up the things and not saying a thing about it and being very friendly while I'm having the conversation of like, what are you, truly, I care that you guys are here. I love that you guys are here in our community park. What are you getting out of it? Do you guys live nearby? Like, how did you all decide to congregate here? And probably pick up those things. And I bet they would have joined me in picking up those things while we were having the conversation and not even saying a word, just showing them. Great questions. All right. So with that, I want to make sure, if we're going to go into breakout rooms and practice having these conversations ourselves. Now with that, let me share my screen. And I am going to mention, if you do not have the ability to participate in a breakout room, I'm going to ask that you go click over your name on the ... and put an X in front of your name. So that way we don't put you in a breakout room. So let me just share my screen real quick for what we're going to be doing in our breakout rooms. So we've got our starter question of what went well in the last week because of you, and then just ask follow-up questions for 5 minutes. Remember, we are digging into their story. We want to see ourselves in their story. How did it feel? Why did they make those decisions? What was their role in it? So just only asking follow-up questions for 5 minutes. Remember, no sofa, suggestions, opinions, feedback, or advice. And then at the end, reflect what you learned about them and the value to you in 1 minute. Now with that, I will keep time, so you don't need to worry about tracking the clock. I will send a broadcast message out when you guys should start, when you have 1 minute remaining in your conversation, and when it's time to start the reflection. And then we'll swap roles. So whoever started asking the questions, then you are going to be the respondee for the next round. And I'm just gonna do a quick pause and just double check any questions before we jump. So let me just do my closeout screen, because I do have a take home for you guys. So let me just share my screen. So for next steps and taking it from here, first off, I'm going to challenge you to go and do this with someone else, someone outside of here. So identify who and when you want to have that conversation. Ask them for permission. Say, hey, I went to this webinar today. This crazy woman taught us about a different way to have a conversation. Can I just try it out with you? And this is the process. And this is the question that I'm going to use. And let me know if you're ever uncomfortable. So asking for that permission, and then ask a finding good starter question. So after this, Becky's going to share this presentation, and she will, or rather you'll be able to have all of those questions in your back pocket. And then also, I do have a guide, a free guide on connecting on the good stuff. So this is just a basic guide on how to have these conversations. It's a more in-depth guide than what I shared here today. A lot more words on there if you're interested in that. So I've got the QR code here. Let me also plug the into the chat. I can put the, it doesn't seem to want to let me. Hold on, let me just end the show real quick and see if that helps. Sorry, guys, technical difficulties. Okay, in the chat. Yes, SOFA, suggestions, opinions, feedback, and advice. All right, and then so there's the form as well if you didn't get the QR code. So I'll just pop up the QR code once more. And if you guys ever want to chat more on this, if you ever have more questions or you're curious, you can reach me at brie@brianfretwell.com. Brian Fretwell is my business partner who came up with all of this. You can follow him on Instagram. He's got like over 100,000 followers talking about stuff like this, which is pretty powerful. So with that, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for having these conversations. I know it was a little different, a little intimidating, and I'm proud of you for showing up.
Yay! I want to say huge thank you to Brie. Everybody, please help me in giving her a round of applause. I mean, selfishly, I get to spend an hour with my friend. So, but this was such a great conversation, and I know it seems we all are taking away new tips and tricks with us. SOFA, I think, is going to stick with everybody. So thank you. On behalf of Women in Sustainability, we will be planting 3 trees in your name through One Tree Planted. So you'll get a certificate with your trees and information on that. If anybody's around tonight, we have another event tonight. We are taking part of Women's Equality Day with the Pledgeettes, along with several other organizations. It is at Town Hall Collaborative from 5 to 8. It'll be a really fun time. We always have a good time with the Pledgeettes. So come on out and see us tonight. We're getting ready to announce our fall events. We'll be announcing those next week. Stay tuned. We've got lots of really great ways to engage coming up, including this series of community voices, of continuing to hear from our amazing community members and the work that they're doing. So thank you again, Brie. Thank you all of you for being here today. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. It's going to be cool soon. The cool front's coming.
Yay! All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for all that you do, everyone. You're amazing.